All right, welcome back to Inside the Birds NFL Draft live recap coverage. Geoff Mosher here alongside Greg Cosell. Of course, this is brought to you by Ocean Casino Resort in Atlantic City. It's the exclusive Jersey Shore resort of Inside the Birds. Greg, it's a miracle. The Eagles actually stayed and picked at 30, and I got a good feeling why, because they really liked Nolan Smith, and I'm not sure if you shot everybody up with truth serum there. They thought he'd be available all the way at 30, as there was a vibe and a sense that he would be in the mix for them at 10, depending on how the board broke. It obviously didn't, but Nolan Smith, another Georgia Bulldog, joins this Eagles defense. And at this
It took
point,
the midnight train to Georgia,
that's right.
Geoff, you know?
Yeah, well, there's more
Um,
passengers on that train than just
yeah.
him, right? So what
Um,
do you think here?
I am sure they stayed there because I think you and I both would agree that they probably had Nolan Smith as a top 10 or top 12 player on their board. And he fits, I think, exactly the way they want to play. Nolan Smith, to me, could be used in multiple ways, but I think ideally you probably see him as a Sam linebacker in your five-man front, which, of course, is the position Hassan Reddick plays. But Nolan Smith is such a gifted athlete. I started to think, and I thought about this. We talked about this earlier in our pre-draft show that, I think he could play snaps as a stacked backer, which, by the way, he did some of that in the 2021 national semifinal game against Michigan. So he's done that. And it would not surprise me if to get him on the field, because we know he's an incredibly smart kid, incredibly aware kid, a great leader. It would not surprise me if they wanted to get him on the field if they thought that he could get some snaps at stacked linebacker.
It's an interesting point that you bring up, because the Eagles really haven't been the type of defense, even last year with Jonathan Gannon, where they're going to do a whole lot of intricate stuff with a stack linebacker as far as maybe blitz, maybe cover. But they have a new defensive coordinator now, Sean Desai,
Right.
and you could also say they never really had that kind of inside-outside linebacker hybrid who could do that. Although Nakobe Dean, another Georgia guy
Well,
waiting in the wings, is a guy
you
who did
know,
rush the passer at times
and again,
differently.
keep in mind, Desai was in Chicago 2 years ago, right?
Yes,
So he had Roquan Smith.
correct.
And Roquan Smith's obviously a high level stack backer. That's what he is. He's a stack backer. So again, I'm not saying that's going to happen. I'm just saying if Nolan Smith, as we all know, is smart and aware and probably can figure things out. If you go through camp and you decide he's one of your best 11, instead of just getting, 10 snaps a game, maybe in place of Hassan Reddick, maybe you feel you want him on the field.
Right.
And that doesn't mean he plays 70 snaps, but if you feel you want your best players out there more often than not, you try to find a way to get him out there. And quite honestly, because he has done that before, it hasn't been what he's done primarily or predominantly, but he has done that before.
Sure. So the good thing here, as you mentioned, Hassan Reddick, I wanted to sort of circle back to what we discussed with Adam Caplan when we did the draft preview show earlier tonight. The Eagles are a heavy analytics team and a heavy testing and measurables team.
Right.
And this is a kid who's a defensive end at Georgia, although, again, they have different views of where they're going to be. But at Georgia, edge rusher, ran a 4.39 at 6'3", 238 pounds, with a 41 and a half inch vertical, which is a high vertical jump than DK Metcalf and a better 40 than Breece Hall. So you're talking about a defensive player, an edge rusher, who tests like a skill position player there.
Right.
That had to be a big motivating factor in the Eagles, like you said, staying at 30 when everybody's trading up and down and getting a guy that they had to have a high value on.
Oh, without question. And that's why they stayed there and took him, because you're also, keep in mind, he's a young player. He played 6 games this year. I believe he got hurt in either the 6th game or the 7th game. He's, supposedly medically fine now. But he's a young player who has a lot of football ahead of him because he hasn't played a ton, because Georgia, as you know, they have so many 5-star players, of which he was one when he came out of IMG Academy in Florida. He was a top 5 recruit in the entire country, regardless of position. So he's got a big time pedigree, but has not played a ton of football, so he's not worn out. And he's a guy that I'm sure they felt, hey, when he's there, we're taking him. And I'm just really curious to see how he's deployed within the context of this defense, because, he essentially plays Hassan Reddick's position. That would be his primary position. But I don't think they're going to sit him. I think he's going to get snaps. He's going to be on the field somewhere.
Yeah, in some ways, when you look at the four-man rush, which is always what you look at primarily when you're pressuring a quarterback, right? And with the Eagles especially, you can say they'd be a little light at the edges if they were able to get Reddick and Nolan Smith on the field at the same time. Clearly, neither of those guys can play inside, but Josh Sweat is a player who
He can
has
move inside.
moved inside. And now that you've just drafted Jalen Carter, I don't want to call it insurance, but in case Jordan Davis just isn't ready yet to be
he's not going
to, which he's not going to be by year 2.
Yeah, he's
right?
not going to be. He's not going to be that guy.
Yeah. So it gives them, again, these are some young players we're talking about, so they have to go out there and show it. But theoretically, if you can have a four-man rush, and don't forget about Brandon Graham getting interchanged there, but with some form or fashion of Reddick and Sweat and Smith, I mean, you got a lot of speed and power there, between all three of those guys.
Correct. And again, it just plays into that philosophy we've spoken about. In their mind, they never have enough, defensive linemen who can rush the quarterback. That's what they want. Mm-hmm. And, so I think it just plays into that, and it'll be really interesting to see. I mean, I'm fascinated because I think in Carter and Smith, they got two players who you could easily, Carter for sure, but you could easily, I would bet other teams as well probably had Smith, relatively high. Of course, he wasn't taken. You just never know, because teams do draft for need as well. They all say they're taking the best player available, but we know they're taking the best player available at a position of need.
Yeah. No, Nolan Smith was an interesting kind of research for me, talking to NFL teams, because as I said on the preview show, he was an all over the map type of guy. So certain teams were going to love the athleticism. Yep. Certain teams, like you said, were probably going to say, great kid, great player, but where does he fit with what we do schematically at that size? I felt he could go anywhere from, late to like 5 to 10 area to all the way to 18 and 25. And here he goes to 30. So this could be an example of I think Eagles fans are going to look at this somewhat similarly to a player like Nakobe Dean, who fell to the 3rd round, where maybe they're getting a special player, maybe more so 2 or 3 years down the road at 30. So we'll have to see how that goes. But the one thing you and I were able to talk about on the preview show that I think is really important is that this kid's character really jumps off you. Leadership. I mean, he's known as one of the great kids to come through that program over the last few years. You've heard that, right?
And I think you make a good point for, teams that are true 4 down line teams. Obviously there's a number of teams now that play 5 as a base and even in their sub, but teams that are purely 4, they might look at Nolan Smith, and as much as they love him, they might think, okay, he played essentially on the ball at Georgia. He's not going to play on the ball for us. So as much as we like the talent and the tape and the kid, he becomes a significant projection. And you normally teams think they don't want to take projections in the 1st round. Now, every year is different, but normally you don't want to take a projection, a position projection in the 1st round, because maybe those teams felt that, hey, he'd have to be a stack backer. And if he's a stack backer and he really has just played that minimally, we don't want to take him as much as we might like him. The Eagles don't have that issue, because essentially he can be an on-the-ball player for the Eagles. But as I said, I have a feeling they're going to see what he can do in a stack position.
Remind or maybe refresh or just tell our viewers right now who may not have seen the preview show what you felt about his ability to play physical, tackle, things like that, despite being just 238 pounds.
Yeah, I think he plays more physically than the 238 pounds might suggest. He's got upper body power. He's got heavy hands. He would move people. He played the run, Geoff, exceptionally well as an on-the-ball edge player. So, that's something he was able to do. He just has that ability. He took on and he physically jarred pullers in the run game, in the gap scheme where you get the guard pulling. He took them on. He moved them. He really showed short area strength and leverage. This kid's a good football player, and he's an explosive athlete. And on both sides of the ball, you want explosive athletes, and he is an explosive athlete.
Greg, how much was he on the field 2 years ago when they had that great defensive line that had obviously Jordan Davis and Devontae Wyatt and who's the third guy I'm missing? I think all four of them got drafted, but that whole Georgia defensive line, because I remember the Eagles saying, "Hey, we watched tape of them and Jalen Carter," and I think you said the same thing. You watched tape of that great line. Jalen Carter stood out, but did Nolan Smith jump out at you at that time as well?
Yeah, I watched him last year as well, and and Nolan Smith. I'm trying to think back to how much he played. I mean, what Georgia does. He played last year in 2021. Oh, about 500 snaps. So I would assume that that's probably about half, maybe a little more than half of their defensive snaps. Obviously, this year nowhere near that because he got hurt. But in 2021, he almost exclusively played. On the ball. As I said in the national semifinal game, he played some snaps off the ball, and same this year. He's essentially been an on the ball edge player, but he's so gifted and incredibly intelligent that we'll see. We'll see how that plays out.
Yeah. We'll look forward to hearing from Howie Roseman on that when he addresses the media, which should be sometime tonight. Want to go back real quick and sort of finish off the conversation with this. The Eagles have sort of changed a lot before our eyes without deviating from their philosophy. They are a trenches team, right? And they're drafting in the trenches. And here they are picking two guys who are trench players. But last year, for the first time since we can remember, they drafted a 348, 350-pound nose tackle, which has never really been a staple of their defense in modern Eagles history. And this year, they took for the first time in quite a while a guy in the first round who you can say, quote unquote, has some character or off-field risk to him, which is not something the Eagles have done a lot of in the first round lately. I find that to be a really interesting contrast of what they're doing. They're undergoing a change here as the game itself changes a little bit.
They obviously did their research on Jalen Carter. The guy's a high level talent. Obviously they felt he was too good to pass up, and that they can handle him, with however it is inside an organization. Organizations have people who do all those things, and maybe the feeling is with Jordan Davis and a Kobe Dean there, and others, a Fletcher Cox, a Brandon Graham, veterans, Darius Slay, James Bradbury. I understand Bradbury is a total class act, one of those really thoughtful, smart guys. They probably feel that they have a culture within their building that can take a young player who's highly talented and actually is a really good football player and a smart player. There's always a difference. You were talking about speaking with Greg Gabriel and the difference between football intelligence and, normal life intelligence.
Right. Football character and off-field
football character and off-the-field character. Right. And, they probably feel that they have, the capabilities of handling that, because the guy without question was better than the 9th pick in the draft as a prospect.
No doubt about it. All right, we're going to wrap this up. We'll just look ahead real quick to what the Eagles might do in round 2, go for a few prospect names that are still out there. Want to remind everyone it's Ocean Casino Resort's 5th birthday this summer. They can't wait to celebrate with you. Join Ocean for exciting promotions and sweepstakes, headline entertainment, the best day life and nightlife lineup in AC, the debut of the birthday bar, exclusive local collabs and partnerships, commemorative 5th birthday merchandise, and so much more. Don't miss stunning fireworks and unique events all summer long. Ocean Rewards members will enjoy $5 million in gifts and prizes, so be sure to sign up for an Ocean Rewards card to get in on the fun next time you visit them. All right, Greg, day 2. There are some talented names still on the board here. I mean, you've got, I believe, did anyone wind up taking Branch from Alabama?
No, no one took Brian Branch, and I think he's a terrific prospect.
Yeah, Brian Branch, Joey Porter, still available. A couple of offensive linemen still available. The edge rusher, I believe, from Georgia Tech, is it Keon White?
The Chiefs took the edge rusher from Kansas State with the last.
They did. That would be a guy that we thought the Eagles might have their eye on too. The safety from Illinois, Sidney Brown. Yeah,
I actually like the other safety better, Jartavius Martin, but that's me.
Gotcha. Have heard that the other safety, some people like him as well, if not more. Give me your Branch breakdown, because it feels like if he's available in the second round for the Eagles, they'd be silly not to want to take him.
Well, I love Brian Branch. I mean, the thing is, he didn't test exceptionally well, but he's just one of those guys that is a great football player. First of all, he's an unbelievable tackler, which is a lost art. He essentially played slot corner for Alabama, but he can play safety. He's very scheme versatile. So you can use him, I think, in many different ways, depending on how you see him within the context of your defense. He's just a complete multi-dimensional player. I don't want to say the game looks easy to him, but he just is very smooth, very aware, incredibly smart. He can play man, he can play zone. He sees things really well. I just think, he ran a 4.58 that might turn some people off. His athletic testing measurables weren't really great. And like I said, and he's not big. He's a little over 5'11 and 190. So those things could have been negatives in the minds of people, but I just think he's one of those guys that's a really good player.
Okay. How about if we move to corner, because Branch could be a sort of a hybrid, right? A corner or a safety. Right. If we go pure corner, there's Julius Brents, Joey Porter Jr., any of those guys whose tape you really enjoy for the way the Eagles play defense?
Well, it's interesting you say that because they both are incredibly long. They both have 34-inch arms, which is ridiculous for a corner. Now, Porter is your prototypical height, weight, speed corner prospect. And normally those guys get drafted in the first round, and he did not. So he's got exceptionally long arms, really good athletic traits. He's really a press man corner. That's his thing. He sort of fits the classic profile of the boundary corner in the NFL. And he's an outside corner. He's not a slot corner. So that's what he is. Obviously you don't play press man every snap, but that's what he does absolutely best. I thought that he'd for sure go in the first round because 6'2.5" corners with 34-inch arms. Normally, that's kind of what you're looking for. So
right.
Again, I don't know the other issue. If there's any other issues that I don't know, but I think that, that's kind of what Joey Porter is.
And of course, you have to look at the offensive line with the Eagles really not addressing that in the first round. Joe Tippmann from Wisconsin is a very athletic, as a good center, and was one of Bruce Feldman's freak list guys. Can he play guard in the NFL?
He started his final 2 seasons with 22 starts at center. That I can't answer, not being an offensive line guru. But he's 6'6", 313. He's long, he's athletic, he's got a great frame, he's got functional athleticism, he's a strong run blocker. He generated and unleashed power through his hips and his core. I thought that in pass protection he was very good as well. To me, he's the best center prospect in this draft.
Gotcha. Better than the Minnesota kid who some people felt would go in the first round.
I think so. Yes.
And both are still available for the second round, along with Steve. Is it Avila or Avila from TCU?
Steve Avila.
Steve Avila, another interior offensive line prospect.
He played center and guard. This past year, he played left guard, but he has played center. He's been a 3-year starter. He's just a good football player to me as well. He's got size, arm length, strength, movement. He's tough. He's got strong, heavy hands. I think to me, he struck me as a day one starter in the NFL. One of those guys.
Wow. So lots of depth here. So don't pick until late in the second round, but they could move up and also stay there and probably get themselves a good prospect. We'll have that covered on Friday. Adam Caplan will be back to join us. It'll be me and Adam Caplan Friday. And then, of course, on Saturday, day 3, we're going to bring Andrew DeCecco in for our coverage. He specializes in the small school and the day 3 prospects. Great weekend of coverage here at Inside the Birds. Definitely got to thank our producer, Jimmy Hyden. He's doing all the work behind the scenes, from the NFL Draft preview show to these live stream recaps we've been doing. Jimmy Hyden from Public Square Media. We appreciate you so much. Thanks for everything. Greg, we appreciate you for joining us all night long. We know it's getting late, so we're going to let you go, and we're going to wake up all tomorrow and do this all over again, except, you don't have to come on with us. So we appreciate everything, my friend.
But I'll be back in the office watching tape.
Yes, you will. And for those who are, avid followers of the Intel with Greg Cosell, he will be doing his final wrap-up episode with us starting next week. So we'll look forward to that too. So for Greg Cosell, I'm Geoff Mosher. You've been watching Inside the Birds live NFL draft preview. We'll catch you all tomorrow.